Robert. Thanks very much. It was good fun to be keynoting alongside David with my little five-man band. So. Thanks. So my talk today is called Future of BIM is Open, and it's something that I strongly believe. I think part of it might be because I come from a small practice and we rely on getting information in and out. But equally, part of it, I think this is just the right way to go, and I'll try and make the case for that in this talk. So a very, very quick shot of us. We started in 2001 and started using BIM, which was pretty lonely at that point in time, and the software was pretty shaky as well. But since then, we've carried on using BIM. I like to occasionally joke that once we piloted traditional 2D workflow in the office about 6 years ago, and it was a nightmare, so we went back using the BIM software again. This is true, in fact. Yeah, I mean, as you can see, we've adopted a lot of the technologies that have come along during the lifetime of the company. I think the last one there is probably the most interesting one and the most relevant one, in that now we probably get 75% of our fees from capturing existing assets, not really architecture at all. And one of the reasons that we get that work, and even though we're small, win it from some of the biggest surveying companies, is because we're focused on treating things like assets rather than just 3D geometry. So I'll move on. You're probably all familiar with these formats, maybe not the one in the middle, which is the product that I use, but they're all BIM platforms. And you know, they're nice pieces of software, they do some fairly good stuff. But the important thing about them for me, and the unfortunate thing about them, is they're all closed, proprietary and commercial. So there's always ultimately somebody upgrading, looking for more license fee, and locking you into their product, their format, whatever. But it's worse than that, as I'll go on to make the argument. You're probably familiar with all of these. These are open, documented, free, extensible. Some of them, in fact all of them, really relate to stuff that we do in the construction industry. Perhaps ISD is the most relevant and the most contentious, maybe even. But the great thing about these is that anybody with any software and a bit of technical now can read any of these formats or use any of these languages. You're not reliant on paying a license fee, and you're not limited to what the vendor of that particular platform is capable of doing with their platform at that point in time. I'm going to make my case with this analogy. We've got a telephone and we've got the internet. Telephone protocols are closed, proprietary, and you pay for them. And as you know, the phone is relatively relevant in the modern world, but actually it's now a subset of the internet. The great thing about the internet is that it was conceived on open protocols, and what's more relevant, the internet or telephones? In fact, yeah, well, the telephone's completely subsumed by the internet now. Maybe we should be a little bit fair and upgrade these to a nice phone, fairly nice phone. So I don't have one, I've got a Galaxy. Product placement. No, but at the end of the day, would the iPhone exist without the internet? Not really. I mean, the reason the iPhone is successful is because Apple managed to put a mobile interface on the internet, but it relied on the internet. And none of the good stuff that we've got in our environment now would really have any, would really have come unless we had the internet. I'm going to chuck in, I've got a few of these quotes, and virtually everything that you read by Tim Berners-Lee is relevant to what we're doing now. Customers need to be given control of their own data, not being tied into a certain manufacturer, so that when there are problems, they are always obliged to go back to them. Yeah? You ever said that to your CAD software vendor? Did they take any notice if you did? It's obvious though, isn't it? You know, if you want to if you want to do something new that you can't do with software, then being locked in is always going to be a problem. This is the state of play at the moment, and I think in many ways we're all sort of bought into the idea that these two have to be one and the same thing. So we've got building data, the geometry, the attributes, and then stuff that you want to do, functions that you perform on building data. Now, for me, I would say these are completely separate, or very comfortable being separate. But obviously, the software vendors would like you to think that to have all the benefits of this, which ultimately, if you think about it, the functional stuff that you do with BIM software is the stuff that delivers the value, not the fact that it stores buildings. Yeah? And that could be right down to the level of producing drawings. You know, I call that the function on building data, but we're so bought into these two things being tied together. The reality is that, and this is what I believe, these two things are very comfortably kept separate. Focus the software vendors on doing the stuff that actually adds value to our process, i.e. performing functions on building data. That might be authoring it, it might be producing drawings, it might be a fluid flow model like this, which, as most of us know, are just pretty pictures, colours to designers, as the CFD guys call them. Or anything else that you can think of, but separate from the building data. And of course, here we go, another quote from Tim Berners-Lee. And there is a parallel with BIM here, I think, and building data. We're sort of almost at the start of this, and we've got a choice as to whether to go down this route. But that's just a simple observation. The internet develops very, very quickly compared to these locked-in protocols. And actually, have you ever had that experience? I don't think anybody using any platform hasn't had the experience where they call up their software vendor and speak to the development team about a new feature they'd like in the product, and maybe you'll get it in 3 years' time, something like that, if you're lucky. If enough people agree with you, it makes it very difficult to be ahead of your time. It makes it very difficult for things to move fast. Whereas with open format, it's up to you. You can move things forward. I throw this slide in because it's a bit of a Michael Cainism. Not many people know this. ISC 2x3 knows all these things. Did you know that if you export to ISC, and I think software vendors should be a little bit embarrassed about this, you can find out more stuff about your building than with any of the existing CAD packages at the moment. The main reason is because ISC understands spatial relationships, which none of the packages do. But there are all of these other things. Part of the reason that ISC gets such a bad name from people is because a lot of these attributes aren't implemented or aren't easy to get into the packages that you're performing functions on your building data with. But all of it, and it's, at the end of the day, ISC is an extensible format. So any extra things that you want on the bottom of this list, add them. I love this quote. It's because it's completely black and white from Paul. The client owns the model. He said that in one of Steve's roundtables, I think, actually, that I was lucky enough to participate in, where somebody had asked the usual question about IT. It was not, might have been Alistair from BDP. Who owns the model? What about the IT? And Paul's answer was completely straight. Client owns the model. But do they? If it's stored in a proprietary format and it requires software to be upgraded every year or every 5 years or whatever, then does the client really own the model? It's certainly questionable whether they can get to it. So I put these next two slides together just to indicate, I suppose, what I would call the spirit of proprietary data versus open data. This is sort of, I guess, what we get with our current CAD packages at the moment. You've got your building model there, and your tool, your chosen tool, or if you're lucky enough to have the resources to move data from one package to another, then maybe you can do a little bit more than this sort of thing. But in a single tool, You might have all these things that you aspire to do, but you can probably only do a few of them in your package, and they're probably not particularly adventurous things anyway. And worst of all, the what if, the stuff that you've thought of that can make your business more successful, well, you don't have a hope in hell of that, because the software vendor's not going to implement it, and if they do implement it, then everybody else will have it too. If you compare that to an open data model, then where information flows freely from the data in the form that it needs into whatever form of analysis, drawing production, all of these things, and anything else that you can think of, the what if. Yeah. When think about, and I think the what if is in many ways the construction process we think is perhaps very well understood and documented, but once you start to get open building information on a portfolio-wide basis, think about what you can do with it. You know, we've got clients in the room. Yeah, imagine you had your entire portfolio in an open format, and somebody came along to you and said, "I've got this idea, and we'd like to run it on your entire building portfolio." How cool would that be? And it starts to sound a little bit like the ubiquitous big data. That's what I'm holding out for. And with ISD, this is possible because this is an open format. You can anything you can think of, you can do it with, or you can do it with data that you can access from ISD. I'm just going to introduce another idea, which I think makes people fundamentally uncomfortable, especially when they think about it in the context of construction. In a sense, it's one of the reasons that, as David alluded to, everybody says they hate coding. The scary thing about coding is it's like this, you know, absolute inundation with information. But we all do this already. You know, how many photographs has everybody in this room got on their computer? They've probably collectively got, you know, certainly over 1 million, maybe 5 million photos between the digital photos residing on hard drives somewhere. One of the comments that you regularly hear about hardware is that hard drive space is free now. And actually, once hard drive space is free, then things start to just drop away, and you end up having huge amounts of data. It's almost like a pond. There's stuff that ends up being at the bottom of it in the mud that you probably never find again. There's a good chance that that's not very important stuff. You know, think about it in the same way as your I don't know what they would be, probably with any luck, that photograph of me falling drunkenly into a lake or something. But building data is the same. There's some that is going to drift to the bottom of the pond. My argument, though, is simply that we should keep it all, and that then leads you back, in many ways, back to this slide. Each of these is, to some extent, a different view of a subset of the data of one's model. You know, and that might be three-dimensional data, it might be a spreadsheet, it might be data that's been pushed out to be analysed. But they're fragments of data. A lot of the time we talk about reducing the amount of data down so that one individual on the current top of the pile is the client or the client FM contractor, reducing the data down so that they can actually deal with it. Whereas in reality, I would say they just need the right view on that data. And if we preserve it, then we'll have, just think about the opportunity in this. You know, and imagine your library, I'm pretty sure most of the applications can do this now, can't they? But your photo library can automatically tag itself for people's faces because it can recognise them in that library. Is that something that was even tangible to you 10 years ago when you were first taking your first digital photograph? Building data is like that. You know, we haven't thought of what we can do with it yet. This isn't what you think. It's a point that occurred to me, I don't know, maybe after talking about this over the last few months, I think. Google is, apart from the fact that it's a bit scary, they've got all of this information about us, fundamentally, do we all agree that having Google in our lives is a good thing? Yeah? Does anybody think it's not a good thing having Google? No hands, yeah? Google would not exist if the internet wasn't conceived with open standards, because there wouldn't be anything to search, there wouldn't be any information to harvest, there wouldn't be the amazing thing that Google can spot through by search terms on the internet 2 weeks before the CDC in the US can. Yeah, how cool is that? But Google wouldn't exist if the internet wasn't open, and all that functionality falls by the wayside for us in buildings if the information that we store buildings in is not open. I'll finish with another Tim Berners-Lee quote, and this is probably the most pertinent one. Data is a precious thing and will last longer than the systems themselves. It's so obvious when you read it. But, yeah, well, that's probably, you pick it. I don't think the iPhone's okay, unless it runs out of batteries, obviously. The internet never runs out of batteries, so that's, I suppose I made my point. Thank you.